Welcome on in, guys. So, I've got a Rapier Musket build for you guys today. Musket has become fairly popular this patch, which is nice to see. It's not like we're playing in a ranged meta where everybody's playing a ranged build. I would actually argue right now in OPR and Capture the Flag, it's more of a melee meta than anything else because of the haste changes. That being said, Musket is just in a good spot right now, you know? I know not all the Musket players out there might agree with that, but I feel like Musket's in a spot right now where it's competitive, it hits hard, but it's not crazy overpowered, and we see quite a few people enjoying it, but it's also not something that has completely redefined the current meta of the game. Anyway, my thoughts on Musket aside, I wanted to share this build with you guys because this is one of my favorite builds to play, and of course, I wanted to update it for this new patch for Season 9. Now, as always, there is a build guide at the end of this video where I go over the build in detail, and there's a written guide linked down below if you guys want to check that out and that's more your style. And finally, I think I'm like one clip away from doing the next top 5 episode. You guys have sent me some clips. They've been awesome. I would love to get the episode done. So if you have a sweet clip that you want to see featured in the New World Top 5 Fights, you can email a link of that clip to Kristofer at pvpnewworld.com. And best of luck to you guys. Now, without further ado, let's get into that PvP commentary. Here you can see we're at the enemy outpost or the enemy flag here, and I'm getting chased down by the opposing players. Something I'm always doing is I'm moving around as often as possible, and you can see I just keep rotating around this central area here to line of sight the range players that are chasing me. Now, we've got some friendlies that came into the fight here too, so thanks to that, we can ignore a few of the enemies at the front and just try to get in behind and do some damage here. I get behind this guy who picked up our flag. I get really good damage, and there's the musket shot. I don't get the killing blow, but we did a ton of damage to that target. And he does end up dropping the flag, but another enemy player picks it up. So I jump back up top here, and I just start shooting at this other enemy musket player. Oh my god, he was very, very squishy. That's exactly what I want to avoid with my build here, is being that squishy and just going down to 2 shots like that. And that's something this build won't do. You won't die to 2 shots like that unless... Well, I mean, honestly, I don't think even a full glass cannon musket will take this build down from 2 shots. So yeah, I really like the more balanced approach. And when we fight those squishier musket players, we can kill them much faster than they can kill us, which is exactly what I want. And here you can see the enemy archer player comes. I throw the trap down. He ends up stepping on it. Now, that placement of the trap was nice because it was kind of hard for him to see coming down the staircase. So that's exactly what I want. And then this guy follows me down the staircase, and I just kind of go behind the corner as I land that shot. Heavy attack from the back there. That was kind of silly. I probably should have gone for the flurry, knowing that he would hit me with a move or a stagger like he did from his greatsword there. And then as the range player comes around this corner, I just keep throwing down traps and just rotating around this pillar. I don't want to give them those easy shots. And there we see the fire mage gets a bunch of damage into me. It's exactly why I build so much anti-fire damage. And I just keep rotating around, using line of sight as best I can to prevent these guys from having a nice clean shot at me. And then eventually it actually ends up working really well. They get distracted by something else. I jump on top of the flag bearer here and just start feeding him damage with my rapier. He ends up going down. And then I quickly switch back into the stack there, and that was really dangerous. What I should have done is either backed up for some pierce with the musket shots or waited for my flurry to be ready before I went in on the stack, but we end up just getting blown up there. And then I like this here. We get a really good trade with this Ice Mage as he comes in. When he switches to his Fire Staff, we just stay really close to him with the Rapiers, so we're always forcing him to turn around. He ends up missing almost all of his attacks because of how close we're standing to him in that exchange. And then as soon as he switches to the Ice Gauntlet, we just back it right up and break a little bit of distance. And just good positioning and good movement against him ends up winning us that fight pretty much. And as he comes around the corner, I just wait for him. Oh my god, we get him with the shot. Down he goes. And then a little bit of time goes on as I move towards the enemy spawn in this outpost rush game. And this guy here goes for the burnout through. I just keep rolling, trying to break some distance. There's the power shot. Oh my god, one enemy player goes down. We almost get the enemy fire mage with that shot as well. And then I just keep backing up. We've got enemy players that are going to come out of the spawn. So the idea here is to just try to break away from the bulk of the players respawning here and just see who will chase me off to the side. And that's how I'm going to try to get some winnable fights. There we land a beautiful shot on that guy as he tries to retreat. Oh my god, man. I gotta say, all of these clips were from one day of PvP, and my aim was just on to that day. I don't know. It usually is not on, so when it is on, it feels good. Right as I missed those two shots. Anyway, this guy here, he walks towards me, he switches to his melee weapon, and I just throw the trap in front of him. This is always a great strategy when you're fighting against an opponent who's swapping between a melee and a ranged weapon. When you're using traps, just kind of anticipate when they're coming towards you with that weapon and then hit them with the trap. That's a beautiful kill on the spear player. We just read his incoming stun, wait for him to throw the stun down and lock himself in the next move, and then get behind him with the flesh and finish him off. And then there on the healer, we get huge damage as he steps in the trap, and I land the shot. Oh my god, man, what is going on here? A little bit of time goes on, more enemy players end up coming into the fight here. As soon as the spear player comes in, I go for the flurry. That's just a good, smart trade to bait his move out, and he ends up going for his pokes. He does no damage. I miss the flurry for the most part, though, but that's okay. It's more about just being in that defensive position as the opponent comes towards you. And there again, as the melee opponent rushes towards me, we just anticipate that. We throw the trap right at his feet, and it lands on him. Again with this guy, the Ice Gauntlet player rushing towards me. We get a good read with the trap, and then two powerful musket shots, and we actually end up taking him down. And there is the damage from that build when the opponent is bleeding from the trap. The finisher additional damage going over to the musket. We just get huge burst damage, and we can do some crazy damage to those guys. And then the spear player comes out here, and there I kind of screw up. We throw the trap a little bit too far. He ends up actually dodging. If he hadn't dodged, that trap would have hit him and landed at the feet. But in order to anticipate the dodge there, we want to throw it in front of where he's going to be, and that way he can still step in it after the dodge. And then these guys just start putting pressure on me on the outside here. Again, just good placement with the trap. We're very patient with that. Honestly, that's maybe my best aim when it comes to musket is my trap placement instead of the shots themselves. I miss both the shots there, end up going back through them. Making these guys turn around is very important when we're in a fight like this. We want them to constantly have to change directions. And there you see, if we do it properly, we're always rotating around them, and they're just swinging their moves in the wrong direction. And there again, I mean, it's like 3 times in a row. This is exactly the lesson to learn from these fights here. You always want to make your opponent turn around and have to face a weird direction. We get caught by the vines, though, so I'm forced to pop my ultimate to make sure I can get out of that. I don't want to eat heavy attacks from that crescent wave, so that's really what's important in this engagement here, is just anticipating. And there's a really good positioning, again, throwing the trap down. Even though we get hit by his attack, because we get the lifesteal off of our big shot on the trap, we end up net really winning that trade. And these guys just keep coming towards me. We get a good shot there. There's the second shot. Big damage on that one. I try to get on top of him, and I can't. Go for the gap closer. Just enough reach. Oh my god. Thank you, haste changes, for allowing me to actually land that attack with my rapier. And we take that guy down. Another enemy players come into the fray, though. And there it is, man. That trap placement is just beautiful. As your opponent comes towards you, you just throw it. It's very fast. You can catch even good players with it as long as you position and time that trap really well. And I, again, just try to keep setting up my combos here. And these guys' health was slowly dropping, but that's going to be the end of the game. So unfortunately, I'm not going to get what I want out of that one. And now for the last clip here, because this is a quote-unquote tankier musket build that I wanted to share with you guys. For the last clip, I wanted to show off some very tanky gameplay from it. Now, we're still going to get some kills in this fight, but the highlight here is not necessarily the kills, but how well this build can survive against a lot of opponents. There, that guy, he just walked into all of my traps, so that was... he was more durable for sure, but that was easy to finish him off just because he was locked down by all my bullshit the whole time. I throw the trap down. We get one player stuck in it. I go for the flesh behind him, really good damage, and then I go for the shot with the musket. If that had landed, that might have been the kill. That was a nice combo, and the big thing there is that the group moved through me and I moved through them. Not all of them are going to turn around in that situation. In fact, it looks like none of them turned around in that situation. So we get to have not only the opportunity for a little bit of offense, but the defensive play from the positioning is really important. And then I'm just going to stay by the rocks here. We don't want to venture too far away because this is going to be my line of sight from the other ranged players that are going to come into this fight. And yeah, just playing around the trap here as well. The tight spacing makes trap even more valuable. This guy ends up jumping up. I get him right as he's about to jump up, and I go for the flurry. We get really good damage, but unfortunately not quite enough to take him down. And the bow player comes around the corner. He starts shooting light attacks. I just throw the trap down, And there is a really good timing with my moves there. Oh my god, I managed to successfully absorb the incoming stun by taking no damage with my flurry up and then just go for big damage on that hammer player. And this is what this is all about, is moving around, using your terrain, and just being smart with your positioning, taking those opportunities. There's that really cheeky light attack into evade. Unfortunately, he was just out of the light attack range, and that was kind of risky, but we do get the trap in time. The big haste allows us to get away, and I just keep shooting at these guys. There's another trap down. This time, though, we do manage to hit a player with the trap. There is a shot into the lower health player as well. He is almost dead. Oh my god, we get the crit. Go for the flesh through, and here I make that big mistake, I think, of trying to be a little bit too aggressive. We got staggered right as I went for that gap closer, so that is going to prevent me from being able to get that kill. But here I land two really nice shots on this guy, and unfortunately the game timer is just at the end, but we almost get the kill on that guy too. All right, let's take a look at that build. Starting off with the attribute points: 350 dex, 150 intel, 50 focus, 150 con. This is a much more durable musket build than what I have played in the past, and that may be what you might find on the internet right now. I know that it's very popular for musket to go full glass cannon, but you definitely don't need to go full glass cannon in order for musket to be viable. That's kind of what I really like about musket right now. It still hits quite hard, even if you have a little bit more points into your defensive spread. I think at the bare minimum, you need 300 dex and 150 intel in order for musket to be viable. But outside of that, yeah, you can put more points than that. You can start building defensively, whatever you really want, as long as you have that minimum in light armor. Now, the big reason why I went for 350 dex instead of going for the 350 intel 150 dex setup is because I really favor that weapon swap cleansing those stun effects. Plus, since we're not going full glass cannon, due to the diminishing returns, the 350 intel and 150 dex setup does hit a little bit harder than this setup, but we miss out on that stun break. And we also miss out on that 15% crit chance, which I think is definitely worth mentioning. Not to mention the dexterity tree here gives a 10% empower for 3 seconds after dodging an attack. And both of our weapons will benefit from this empower too. So it's not like we're completely missing out on the damage side of things. In fact, I would say that this is better when you're going for a more medium damage musket setup. If you go for full glass cannon, of course, you want to have that 350 intel and then dump everything else in dex. As for the defensive side of things, the focus gives us a little bit of cooldown reduction and, of course, some increased healing power, and then 150 con for that additional health, that durability. 10% critical damage mitigation is huge for PvP, and then, of course, the max health increase, etc. Now, the beauty of this build is that you can go full glass cannon with it if you want, or you can kind of mimic this spread here. I think for the sake of all-around gameplay, this is a better spread. Now, let's take a look at the weapon masteries on this build. Starting off with the Rapier. This tree has been done to death for me, but it's still the Rapier tree that I play all the time because it's so much fun. Every single skill here, great offensive, defensive potential. Yeah, Rapier is one of my favorite weapons in the game because it has really good ability to counter and trade with opponents as long as you get good reads on what they're doing. And then I really like Flesh as well because this gap closer allows us to move through opponents. There is something to be said for a gap closer that lets you do that. Honestly, very, very good and useful in PvP because it prevents you from getting body blocked. And then when we take a look at the musket side of things, we have gone with the standard Trapper musket tree using both Power Shot and Powder Burn. Again, I've played this tree a whole bunch, so this should be nothing new for you guys if you've seen previous builds from me. The idea behind this kind of setup here, though, is just to land shots with your musket, get any negative effect ticking on them, including the rune glass will count towards the lethal combo, and then we deal 17% more base damage with our shots against that target. And then traps, of course, if anyone steps in your trap, you can shoot them to heal yourself. Not to mention, it is pretty much a death sentence if a light armor player steps in your trap and they cannot actively dodge both of your shots. They will take a huge amount of damage from both your abilities here if they're stuck there. So yeah, really powerful. Not to mention, traps gives you a little bit of an ability to kind of zone opponents out. And I am running accelerating traps on the musket, so it gives us access to a crazy amount of haste, which is very, very useful, especially since the haste nerf. This is one of the stronger hastes in the game still. Now, let's take a look at the equipment that I'm running on this build. Starting off with the weapons here, the Rapier, we've got the Finisher. Now, normally you guys have seen me run Shrapnel as the musket in the past, but for this build, I wanted to focus on musket damage, so we had to go with Finisher for the Rapier. Now, the Rapier itself is still going to do some pretty good damage if your opponent's bleeding. It's a pretty decent hitting Rapier. That being said, obviously my Narwhal Tusk is going to be a little bit harder hitting than the finisher is here. So, you know, it's a give and trade this time around. We're focusing on musket damage, so you got to go finisher. And then for the musket, I've got a Gorgonite musket. We've got an attunement perk, we've got keenly jagged, and we've got accelerating traps. This is exactly what you want on your musket. Now, I've gone for a arcane build because I have a huge investment into this arcane armor, and I wanted to just put together this for arcane as well, because now that's what my armor is. So the Arboreal Attunement, unfortunately, isn't going to get a bonus from all my additional arcane damage, and there is no arcane attunement in the game yet. So yeah, ideally, you would actually go for nature damage on this build, not arcane. And then, of course, accelerating traps, 22% haste, really, really powerful access to that haste. Not to mention the trap itself will now apply a bleed, which is even better for the finisher. So if anything steps in your traps, you are guaranteed to have that bonus damage from finisher up. And then, of course, both weapons having keenly jagged so that we can proc our finisher bleed passive. For the Rapier to have keenly jagged like this is a little bunk, but this is the only way to make it work if you're playing a grace-focused kit like I am. Now, let's take a look at the armor that I'm wearing here. We've still got the old crown on. Honestly, this is one of the best artifacts in the game, I think, for PvP. If you don't have the old crown, you can make this build work with the attuned leather pants. They give a little bit more max stats, so it's actually a little easier to do this build with attuned leather pants. You don't need quite as much 725 as I have here. And then, of course, I put shirking heels on my old crown. For the rest of the gear here, you can see that shirking heels and refreshing is my mainstay. That's what I want to have for PvP, especially since we have the higher health value. Shirking heels super valuable, and refreshing all around crazy valuable. I always say this when it comes to weapons like Rapier, which have tons of defensive utility. Refreshing is a defensive perk in a way. It's also an offensive perk, so you get a whole lot out of it as long as you are actively using your abilities and, most importantly, making good decisions while you're in that fight. Now, I've got Shirking Energy on the legs, and I've also got Hasted Vigor on the gloves, and finally, Vital Synergy on the chest piece. Those are the other perks that you're really going to want. And then for the boots, we've got that Leeching Flurry. In order for Flurry to work the way it does, we absolutely must have Leeching Flurry somewhere on this build. Since I'm using Finisher, it's got to be on the armor somewhere here. Now, taking a look at the jewelry side of things, I've got the Gorgon's Amulet, Stamina Recovery, Divine, and Health. You could swap out the Recovery for a protection perk of your choice, like Flame Protection or even Slash Protection, but honestly, I really like Stam Recovery in general for PvP, especially since we have more health, we can take a few hits, and we can get this Stam Recovery proc, so we get that additional roll in. And then for the ring here, I actually have the wrong one. Let's just quickly swap it to the Arcane Damage, Healing Breeze, and Hardy. Now, like I said earlier, this would be nature damage ideally instead of arcane damage. This is just because this is my armor set that I was running alongside Crescent Wave, and it was the right armor set to put together for this stuff here. So if you already have a Crescent Wave build you invested in, you can go arcane like me. Otherwise, I would recommend nature damage or a different element outside of arcane because it's very expensive and there is no arcane attunement like I mentioned earlier for the musket. And then for the rest of the ring here, we've got Healing Breeze Hardy. Healing Breeze, super valuable in PvP for pretty much every PvP build. It's just additional supplementary healing, and this will proc off of your Shirking Heals, so you have a pretty good uptime on it. And then for Endless Thirst, as our artifact at the end here, Endless Thirst, as long as we're swapping between potions, this gives a crazy amount of healing power. You don't take the additional cooldown if you're swapping between potions, but if you're only using one, then Endless Thirst becomes a not very good item at all to use. So you absolutely must be swapping between two to get the most out of Endless Thirst. And then for the perk that I chose myself, I went with Regenerating. You could go with Nimble here. I always prefer more healing power myself, so Regenerating was the natural choice. And Refreshing Toast does nothing for Endless Thirst now. So yeah, definitely Regenerating or Nimble. And last but not least, for our ultimate, we've got the Stone Form, and Stone Form's just great for healing, great for getting out of a stun, great for getting out of bad situations. This build is very anti-CC, so that really works to your advantage. And then taking a look at the resists here, you can see I have gone for a fairly balanced resist with a huge focus on fire damage resistance, because fire damage is scary. And there you go. That is the build. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope that you enjoyed, and have a great night, everybody.